In the winter of 1776, the American cause was not rising, it was collapsing. Soldiers were deserting, cities were falling. Hope itself seemed to be slipping away. And in those desperate months, there was a very real possibility that the war for independence would simply end in failure. This is the story of the war America almost lost. It began not with victory, but with uncertainty. When fighting broke out in 1775, few colonists imagined independence. They were not yet Americans, not in the modern sense. They were British subjects, protesting what they believed were unjust policies, taxation without representation, a distant parliament, a government that ruled without understanding. But events moved faster than intentions. Shots were fired at Lexington and Concord, Boston erupted into siege, and soon protest became rebellion. At the center of it all stood George Washington, a man who didn't look like a revolutionary, but became the one they couldn't replace. When he took command in 1775, he didn't inherit an army. He inherited a fragile collection of militias, untrained, undersupplied, uncertain. Across the battlefield stood Great Britain, the most powerful empire on earth, a professional army, a dominant navy, global resources, and confidence that this rebellion would soon be crushed. The Americans, by contrast, were improvising a war. At first, there were signs of hope. The British were driven from Boston, and in the summer of 1776, the colonies made a bold, irreversible choice: declaration of independence. A rebellion became a revolution, but declaring independence and securing it were very different things. In August 1776, the British struck back with overwhelming force. New York became a battlefield, and the result was disaster. Washington's army was nearly destroyed, forced into retreat again and again and again. New York, lost. New Jersey, slipping away. Soldiers deserted, supplies ran dry, morale collapsed. At one point, the entire Continental Army shrank to just a few thousand men. The revolution hung by a thread, and then, in the darkest moment, came a decision. On Christmas night, 1776. Washington made his move through ice, through darkness, across the Delaware River, exhausted men marching into uncertainty, their target, Trenton. The attack was sudden, chaotic, and successful. Victory. Then another at Princeton. Not enough to win the war, but enough to keep it alive. Because belief was everything. But the danger wasn't over. In 1777, the British launched a bold plan to cut the colonies in half, multiple armies, one objective, Albany. But something went wrong, coordination failed, and one army, led by General John Burgoyne, marched straight into isolation, surrounded near Saratoga. The result, Battle of Saratoga, a surrender. That stunned the world. For the first time, it seemed possible that the Americans might actually win. And that changed everything. Across the ocean, France had been watching, waiting, and now they saw opportunity. In 1778, France joined the war. Show money, troops, and most importantly, naval power. For the first time, Britain's dominance could be challenged, but even alliances couldn't erase suffering. Winter came again. Valley Forge, cold, hunger, disease, men without shoes, without blankets, without hope. And yet, they stayed. Under Baron von Steuben, the army transformed, drilled, disciplined, reborn, not just a militia anymore, but a real army. Still, the war dragged on, and the British turned south, believing loyal support would rise. Cities fell, violence spread, neighbor against neighbor, a civil war within a revolution. The American cause remained fragile. Victories uncertain, losses painful, and exhaustion everywhere. But through it all, Washington understood something critical. The winning wasn't always necessary, survival was. And as long as the army existed, the revolution lived. Meanwhile, the war expanded beyond America into a global conflict. Britain stretched thin, and that strain would decide everything. In 1781, British General Cornwallis moved to Yorktown, waiting for rescue, waiting for the Royal Navy. But the balance had shifted. But a French fleet blocked the sea. On land, American and French forces closed in. Washington, Rochambeau marching south, surrounding Yorktown. No escape, no reinforcements, no hope. This wasn't a battle, it was a trap. In October 1781, Cornwallis surrendered, siege of Yorktown. The war was over. Against all odds, America had won. But history can be misleading. Victory can feel inevitable. Wasn't. At any moment, everything could have collapsed. So if Washington had fallen in 1776, if Trenton had failed, if Saratoga had been lost, if France had stayed away, no, there might be no United States today. Even then, the colonies were divided. Not everyone believed in independence. Not everyone wanted revolution. And this was never a certain victory. It was a fragile, contested struggle. And that is what makes it remarkable. Because this wasn't just a military triumph. It was endurance, adaptation, refusal to give up when defeat felt inevitable. So it was an idea, fragile, uncertain, dangerous, that survived long enough to change the world. And the war America almost lost became the nation's foundation. And its greatest lesson is not victory, it's survival.